Adrian Martinez, it's very well known that he got really dinged up at Nebraska. And this is according to an article written November 24th of 2021. It says Nebraska quarterback Adrian Martinez had surgery Wednesday on his injured shoulder, according to head coach Scott Frost. Frost said a decision on Martinez's future with the Huskers would come very soon, which ended up him going to Kansas State, quitting with Nebraska, transferring over to Kansas State. So he has a known shoulder injury, which kept him from spring practice all the way until the last two practices. But then there's been question from like the Cornhusker media, and it's because they just want him to fail. Like that's the only reason that they're sitting around saying, is he going to be okay? We're not sure if he's going to be okay for 2022. It's like, no, he's going to probably be just fine. But you don't want him to be okay, because if he does really well at Kansas State and wins K-State, I don't know, a Big 12 championship, then that's going to make Scott Frost in Nebraska look really stupid, which is something you can't handle. So let's get that confirmation bias out of the way first. But it is no secret, he's dinged up. He is coming off of a shoulder injury. And then also, this is from December 18th of 2019. Nebraska quarterback Adrian Martinez, who struggled with injuries in the Cornhuskers' disappointing 5-7 season, had off-season surgery, but will be ready for spring practice. Coach Scott Frost said on Wednesday. Frost declined to address specifics of Martinez's injury or Martinez's surgery, but it seemed to indicate that he was having a lot of issues with his knee. It says Martinez missed losses to Minnesota and Indiana because of a knee injury, as the Cornhuskers finished one win shy of bowl eligibility. So from what it's looking like, and I don't really think I can confirm it from everything that I've seen, but it looks like that he's had two different surgeries at this point. He's had a knee surgery and a shoulder surgery, as well as all the stuff with his broken jaw. He's really been dinged up at Nebraska. And so, I don't know. I think the shoulder injury is the most pressing injury right now. He's a right-handed thrower. His right-handed shoulder. It was exactly what we saw with Skylar Thompson in 2020 when he took that nasty hit in the Texas Tech game, which should have been, they might have thrown the flag on that one, but I remember it distinctly because K-State's linebacker, it might have been Daniel Green actually, just shot the gap and smoked the Texas Tech quarterback. I mean, just smacked him. And they pulled him out of the game because he was dinged up. And then the next series later, they smacked Skylar Thompson. It was very obvious, like, okay, you're just taking cheap shots now because you're mad that our guy shot the gap and hurt your quarterback, which, that's football. And conversely, you could also say what I'm indicating is a little bit more on the conspiratorial side is also just football, but, that's what it looked like. But I'm very curious, in your professional medical opinion, it's very little information, but do you have an idea as to what it could be? Do you think it's something with his rotator cuff? What's a pretty standard football shoulder injury, especially to your throwing arm?
Well, so first, I don't know if he's going to be able to hold up under the pressure. I just don't know. That's a tough. No, I'm just kidding. I think he'll be just fine.
Okay,
but that's exactly what
I was like. Whoa, hold on a second.
I think he'll be just fine. Modern medicine. And think of all the different surgeries that athletes have now, and they still come back, and sometimes they even seem better. So here's the problem. I have no idea what the actual injury is because it's really hard to find. And just like Bill would keep a lid on injuries, I think maybe Scott Frost has been the same way and wants to keep a lid on injuries. And at least it seems that way. So I don't know that they've put it out there. And it makes sense. Why would you tell anybody exactly what your injury is? Because now if by chance you're right and a team is going to respond with tit for tat or whatever, or get back, you just knocked our quarterback down, so we're going to knock your quarterback down kind of thing. If you knew they had a Achilles injury, that could be a detrimental thing under the pile. Who knows what they do to that Achilles?
Yeah.
You just never know. Anyway, so what is the injury? I don't know. Rotator cuff's the logical one. The supraspinatus tendon is the main part of the rotator cuff. The rotator cuff has 4 different tendinous structures that make up the rotator cuff of the shoulder. The shoulder is a very sophisticated joint. Hence, the recovery takes longer than a lot of joints. Hip joints seem to be about the quickest. Maybe finger joints are the easiest, but the hip joints are probably the quickest. because it's a standard ball and socket. The shoulder is more than a ball and socket. It's got the rotational component, almost to the point that it can rotate 100 or 360 degrees. Not quite, but almost. So rotator cuff's the obvious. But in quarterbacks, it's very common to have a FOOSH injury, which is a fall on outstretched hand. FOOSH, that's the acronym, fall on outstretched hand. And you can imagine you throw the ball as you're getting hit, and then so you're throwing as you're going down, and then you do the obvious thing, stick out your arm to catch yourself. Well, the capsule of the shoulder is a firm capsule. It's a very fibrous capsule, and it can take that normally, but when it's a fluke thing and it hits it just right, the force of the humerus in the glenoid process forces itself through that fibrous capsule, and now you've got a pretty serious injury, a FOOSH injury. So that's what I think it probably was.
Well, and it's interesting that you say that because it says further on in this Nebraska article that regarding his shoulder injury, it was that he actually had taken it was a FOOSH injury. He had stuck out his hand, he got knocked over, passed the ball, knocked him over. He stuck out his arm to catch himself on the ground, and that's what jacked up his shoulder for 2021.
Yeah, imagine even if you've stuck your arm out and you're doing a push-up, and then all of a sudden a 300-pound defensive lineman falls on your back.
Yeah.
Or whatever. 3 of them do. And now think of the stress that your shoulder takes with that.
Yeah.
So fall on outstretched hand, that's what I think was the injury. It's kind of like Mahomes' injury. It's one of those fluke things when Mahomes dislocated his patella, his kneecap, while going on a quarterback sneak.
Yeah.
So then we never saw a quarterback sneak again because it was going to happen again. Well, it was such a fluke. I don't know that it was ever going to happen. Now, it's more common to have a FOOSH injury for a quarterback than the patellar dislocation, but it's still an unusual injury.
So, did you just make that up, FOOSH, or is that like an actual? That's a medical.
It's a real thing.
Okay.
It's great, isn't it? FOOSH.
Yeah. FOOSH.
Yeah,
okay. Fall on outstretched hand. That's awesome. Yep. So conversely, Kansas State, we saw last season in the Nevada game, Khalid Duke, who Chris Kleiman has lauded as the top pass rusher in the Big 12, didn't really get to strut his stuff because he was taken out of the game early in Nevada, and Nevada was the third game of the season. So we lost Skylar Thompson in Southern Illinois, and then we lose Khalid Duke in Nevada. It says the countdown continues. This is a little bit earlier in the years, from April of 2022. It says the countdown continues as Kansas State prepares for life with a healthy Khalid Duke. The 6'4", 240-pound hybrid linebacker / defensive end suffered a season-ending injury to his left knee against Nevada last September, causing him to redshirt his junior season and dealing a tough blow to a special talent that head coach Chris Kleiman called one of the best pass rushers we have in the Big 12. Duke, who had surgery following the injury, has been held out of contact drills and spring practice. It wasn't until this Wednesday, also take that with a grain of salt because this is written in April, that he wore pads for the first time for limited drill work. He likely won't have an opportunity to hit somebody on the field until fall camp, some 10 months after he landed awkwardly in the second quarter of a 38-10 win over Nevada and was unable to put any pressure on his left foot. So we talked about knee injuries, common knee injuries for football players. Is this still like an ACL, MCL kind of deal, or what's a knee injury that would not allow you to put any kind of weight on your knee? I mean, that sounds like usually when you're like, you can't put any weight on your leg, it's like, well, you broke your leg, right? It's not that you blew out your knee.
Okay, so I think this is a FOOSH knee injury, fall on outstretched knee. I'm just kidding.
Oh.
That's a new one. Now, that one I did make up. So
okay.
So there's a common fracture that occurs. It's interesting you went straight to the fracture, so I think you got something there. He would have been able to put some weight on a ACL or MCL tear or PCL. So anterior cruciate, posterior cruciate, medial collateral, lateral collateral ligament complex. Had he torn any of those, he should have put weight on it. He also, had he torn a meniscus, he should have still been able to put weight on it. Now, short of just the joint being totally filled up with blood, which once the tear occurs, whatever kind, the body immediately, accumulates blood in the joint and fluid, and so hemarthrosis is what that's known as. And short of having this severe hemarthrosis, blood in the joint, that prevented him from putting weight. The only other thing that makes sense is a fracture. Now, there's a very common fracture that occurs called a tibial plateau fracture. So the tibia is the larger bone in the leg. The leg is actually the part of the lower extremity from the knee down. So the thigh, or the femur, or the femoral complex is the hip to the knee. Okay, so that's not really known as the leg. So when people refer to the leg, which is a very late person thing to do, is to say, yeah, I injured my leg. Well, in true medical vernacular, that means from the knee down.
Okay.
So the leg includes the tibia and the fibula. Okay, tibia is the bigger bone in the leg below the knee, and the fibula is the smaller bone on the outside. Okay, the fibula's function is really important in the joints, the knee and the ankle joint. But the tibia is a weight-bearing bone. So it's very common when you have a jarring or a high-impact force injury, which would be very common for someone like Khalid to have. I think you would get, it's very plausible to get a comminuted, which means fragmented, tibial plateau fracture. Well, the plateau is the weight, it's like a house. The plateau, it's the foundation. It's the heaviest part of the tibia, the most important part of the tibia, the plateau or the proximal part of the tibia bone. So I would suspect he had a comminuted, which means fragmented, tibial plateau fracture. So I think you're probably right.
So that was just a shot in the dark. I don't.
Well, no, you were practicing your John Carter.
I was to say I don't foresee medical school anywhere near my future.
Dang.
But so for an idiot like me, then would it be? So you're saying that first, okay, I need to clear this up. First, the tibia and the fibula are located where? So the tibia is like the
and fibula are the leg. They're from the knee down.
Okay.
They're the two big bones from the knee down.
Okay.
So it's, it makes up your shin.
Okay.
The tibia makes up your shin.
So you're
fibula
thinking
is the smaller bone, long bone on the side.
Okay, so you're thinking that the top
so the femur is the big thigh bone.
Okay.
The femoral head fits in the hip socket, so the pelvis. The femoral condyles are the two bones that form to make up the knee joint. So the two femoral condyles, there's a medial and a lateral femoral condyle. They're kind of rounded or kind of maybe like a tire shape. They fit into the tibial plateau. So they fit into a little groove. There's a groove that's on the outside of your leg, and then there's a groove that's on the inside of your leg and in the tibia. So where the femur and the tibia meet, those form together to make the knee joint. Okay?
Okay.
I believe the femoral condyles, they were probably stronger than the tibial plateau. And so as the force came down with an impact-type injury or a high-force impact, that the two femoral condyles probably did not break, but the tibia, the top part, the proximal end of the tibia broke into little fragmented pieces. That's what I speculate.
Okay.
Hence, he couldn't put any weight on it.
And would that require surgery like he had?
Yes, absolutely. And I would speculate he also bruised or maybe even fractured his femoral condyles as well, because the tibial plateau probably gives first with the high impact, and then the condyles are going to get bruised at minimum. The condyles are really interesting. They're these two. I can't think of a good description, but they're like having a tire in a groove, but two tires side by side, parallel inside two grooves, and that allows the knee to have a hinge. So it you can flex your knee and extend your knee. So it's the hinge. Well, the condyles have hyaline cartilage as their covering. And the reason they have that, the reason God made us that way, is so that our knee joint can have such a smooth hinge, so you can be an upright walking mammal. So
okay.
It's pretty cool. It's pretty interesting. And I suspect his femoral condyles got bruised at minimum.
Okay.
And
nice.
I don't know that. You can't find that in you can't find that on the internet.
Oh, no. And it's wise for K-State not to put it out there.
Yeah, I agree. So, but I would bet that's what happens. And then you got to think this through too. So if Khalid wasn't an athlete and he got a tibial plateau fracture from, say, a car accident or something, or jumping off of a ladder or a house or whatever, so he jumps and it fractures the tibial plateau. Well, if he's not an athlete, they're going to put screws in there, and they're going to repair it by reconstructing it. Well, for an athlete, they probably still had to put some screws in there, but they had to do it in a way they could remove those screws, because think of the hindrance that a person would have playing football with screws in their knee.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
It'd be very difficult.
For sure.
Because of the trauma that a joint takes playing football.
So we were just talking about, if in case you missed it, the potential injuries of what actually occurred to Adrian Martinez and Khalid Duke. From a medical perspective, I'm a little bit biased, but I've got my dad, who's a double board certified physician in interventional radiology, and Dr. Kipp, Dad, you've been breaking down for us what you think happened to Khalid Duke, because it seemed kind of fishy that it was like, well, he had what K-State portrayed as a classic knee injury, right, which is something to do with the ACL or the MCL, one of those ligaments. But then all of a sudden, it's like it said in the article he couldn't put any weight on his leg. It's like, well, then that probably means that he fractured something, and Dad has. I've just sat here and listened and said, oh yeah, but Dad has deduced that there was a what did you call it?
Tibial plateau fracture.
Yeah,
is what I speculate.
Okay, so tibial plateau fracture that required surgery, a different kind of surgery than a reconstructive surgery, because that would have required pins. And as an athlete, especially one that needs explosion like Khalid Duke at hybrid linebacker D end for pass rushing, nonetheless, you have to have that speed, right? And you're gonna seriously reduce your speed with pins in your joint. So yeah, that's not ideal.
The other thing I would, caveat would be that, he could have blown out the ACL, the PCL, both the medial and collateral ligaments, and injured his meniscus and still got fluid and blood in the joint. And that would be very hard to put weight on. So he may have just blown out his knee totally. And it was all a reconstruction of the soft tissues, the ligaments. And so that's a possibility. So I don't want to discount that. But, just the knee-jerk reaction from a medical standpoint is it's probably a fracture.
Okay.
The other thing I wanted to say that's really cool, but it's for another show, but it'll give you, just a teaser out there. So there's a thing called an osteochondral defect. And the osteochondral defect is really a cool injury. It's not, doctors see funny things and think things are cool, where everyone else would be like, oh, that's just terrible.
Yeah.
But so I was talking about the femoral condyles, the smooth part of the femur that's what I described as maybe a tire, a really smooth tire, a bulb tire that's really smooth. Well, an osteochondral defect, a little defect based on trauma, a little chip of bone or a little chip of that femoral condyle or hyaline cartilage breaks away. It's oftentimes the size of a dime or a nickel, and it breaks away, and it becomes a loose body and floats around inside the joint. And fixing that, because the blood supply to the actual distal femur, the femoral condyle, is not good. There's no major vessel going there, so you can't get it to heal. So all kinds of things are tried, from bone marrow transplants to surgical grafts to scarring it up and trying to make the body heal itself. But what's really cool is the whole stem cell treatment. And I have an former NFL player, who had one of these defects, and he had since retired because he couldn't fix it. And he came and saw me. So here's your teaser, and this will be another show, another day. But we put stem cells right there, and the little piece, like a puzzle, floated itself into the exact location and then repaired itself. And it was almost like we put the stem cells in and put glue into the defect on the femur, and then the little jagged piece of bone floated itself into its spot and then healed itself. So that's when it gets really cool. So there's
So-
a show for you, a teaser for down the road.
No, and that's great, and we definitely will talk about that in the future. But so, in your experience as one of the world's leading experts on stem cells, and that's not hyperbole, by the way. Like that's not just like a proud son boasting about his dad. That's like actual fact. You can look it up. But so, in your experience, then, as a radiologist, could you actually verify that with like an X-ray?
Yeah.
Like you could
Yeah,
see
you
the
could.
piece floating around, and then it went back to where it was supposed to go.
Yes, you could. You could show it on an MRI.
An MRI,
And then even on a plain film. Yes. And then so Khalid Duke could have had an injury like that.
Okay. Interesting.
Okay. So it could have been that.
Very
He could
good.
have had an osteochondral defect as well.
What's going on, YouTube? This is Kolby Van Camp here, the host of Training Camp on Kansas State University student radio station Wildcat 91.9 FM. If you like the content that I've been putting out, be sure to hit the like button, smash subscribe, and ring the heck out of that bell so that you never miss another one of my shows again.